Tara, welcome back to Mea Culpa. Great to see you, my friend. Look, there's so much to talk about. The hour goes by very, very quickly here. So I want to start with obvious. What's the obvious, right? Trump is floating the idea of a third term. And I'm talking about third term as president of the United States. And according to a recent report by the New York Times, some within his inner circle claim that it's just a tactic to keep his base engaged. But then there's a multitude of others, of course, claiming anonymity. They believe, as do I, that he genuinely wants to challenge the constitutional limits of the 22nd Amendment. How serious do you think we should be taking this?
You know, some people say, yeah, he's just trolling the libs. Other people say this is probably something he does want or desire at a very deep level. He probably is aware of the fact that his chances of making this happen are pretty far and few between. I mean, you would need 2/3 of the Congress and the Senate to ratify a constitutional amendment to make this happen. But I think even more importantly, he knows that he is a lame duck president. I mean, he really only has another year or so and change to actually do anything before this midterm election. And we have every reason to believe that the Republicans are going to get rocked, especially in the Congress. I mean, the Republicans will probably hold the Senate, but you know, in Congress, they're definitely they only have a 2-seat majority. It's going to be the Democrats who win. And he's probably going to be facing impeachment again for some reason, or a lot of investigations. He can't run for re-election. He may try to, but he doesn't have the congressional allies. He doesn't have 2/3, he does't have 2/3 votes in the Senate and House. He can't even pass a budget without reconciliation.
Tara, I got to tell you though, I'm going to give you a tiny bit of pushback over here, knowing him as well as I do. You're talking like a true American. You're talking like an American who cares about the Constitution. You're talking about somebody that believes that the 22nd Amendment says what it says. Donald Trump does not. Steve Bannon and many of his enablers do not.
Yep,
you may
but they
recall,
can think that.
No,
he can't do anything about it. He can't change the Constitution himself.
Again, when you press the line the way that Donald Trump does on all these constitutional issues, I constantly tell people, you cannot, not for a single second, underestimate this man and his desire to burn the Constitution to the ground. It's what he wants to do. And
totally,
he will
but
push
you can't do it without congressional allies. And he barely
I'm not
has it.
sure. What if hypothetically?
The only thing he could do would be to take the U.S. military and and create a civil war or something like that. But he does have control as the commander-in-chief of the military. But other than that, he doesn't have 2/3 majority in the House or Senate to change anything in the Constitution.
What if hypothetically he gets rid of the entire Congress altogether? As you may recall, Trump
said, that he can do that.
Oh, again, he's pressing and pushing constitutional norms to a place that we have never seen. No other president has ever wanted to do anything like this, ever. But he does. So you'll recall Trump was very quick to turn around and metaphorically say that he wants to rewrite the Constitution. By the way, he's stealing this playbook from Vladimir Putin. There was, at one point in time, a Russian constitution that did not allow the president, at that time, Vladimir Putin, to run for a third term. So what did he do? They created a position of prime minister. And the prime minister, for lack of another term, trumps the president to the point that the Oval Office, or the Duma, would end up being the location that the prime minister sits in. And that's exactly what they were doing. Trump is going to look to try to find any way possible. Never in the history of this country did we have something called presidential immunity. He will look to figure out how to bend the terms as much as they possibly can and not have to go through the route which every other person that believes.
he doesn't have the support of the people. Like, you can only do those things if you have political support. And here's the thing, I will say, I'll give it to them for this. They chose to pick a fight with this Judge Boasberg over a topic that they knew was politically on their side. I don't know anyone who's going to say to you, I want a Venezuelan gang member being my neighbor. So they knew that they won on immigration, right? That's how they won this election. So they said, let's get in a fight with the judge over gangs, like Venezuelan gang members. This is a hard one to stand up, right? And the truth is that judges don't have an army like Trump does, right? They don't have military control. They kind of have a police force, but they don't have the ability to really enforce the rulings the way that he could possibly. But like, ultimately, like, courts, their strength is from, the public, from political strength, from the fact, like, when public sentiment is on their side. So if he doesn't have public sentiment, he can't do these things.
Well, okay, let me give you just again, knowing Trump as well as I do, and knowing how he wants to press the Constitution. Let me just go back and say,
you can't change the Constitution without the votes.
Well,
without the votes.
Again,
what are you saying? Are you saying he's going to go with military force?
By the way, he may not have to. What's another thing that he's doing or trying to do right now? He has this desire to impeach Judge Boasberg, to throw him off the federal bench.
Yeah, he can use intimidation for sure.
It's more than intimidation. Assuming hypothetically that he's successful in getting that done, what does that do? That gives him the ability to do what he said he wants to do, which is to strip the Congress, right, and the judiciary, the legislative branch and the judiciary, of their co-equal powers conferred to them by the Constitution. And he wants to take all the power, confer it to the executive branch, namely the chief executive, namely himself. If he's able to get away with this, hear me on this, if he's able to get away with impeaching Boasberg, who is a federal judge, who has been appointed by a president, who has tenure for life, right? If he could do it to them.
But that would have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. They're not going to impeach Boasberg. They've shot him down a few times.
Well, thank God Roberts shot him down on this one. It was a 5-4 majority. If it flips the other way somehow, the reason Roberts decided to vote against Trump in this case is because if you could do it to a federal court judge, you could do the same thing to the Supreme Court. And as Donald himself said, he wants to strip the two other co-equal branches and to confer all power to himself. If he does that, he will rewrite the Constitution the way he said, making himself the dictator, the monarch, the supreme leader for his life. That's what he's intending to do.
Yeah, but he can only do this by military force. That's the only way.
Well, I'm not 100% sure about that, but like I said,
there's no other way to do this except the only way to do this is by military force. Like, you can't do that any other way.
Well,
there's no other way to do it.
You know what? I'm going to have you back in 6 months onto the show, or a year, and we're going to see.
Michael, in a year, the Congress is going to look so fundamentally different in a year. Yeah, they're going to clash. But like, let's see what happens this week with those special races right now. The Republicans are sweating bullets over the seats held by Mike Waltz and Matt Gaetz that Trump won by 30 points in Florida.
Right.
The guy, the Democrat, the Democrat is outraising them. He's outpolling them. Trump's own pollster, Tony Fabrizio, is finding this. They're in bad shape. You can only pull these things off. The difference between Trump and Putin, who was able to do this, not only the fact that he was followed by Stalin and the USSR, I know this, you know this, having family coming from there. The only difference is like that he already had that groundwork, right, laid down for him in an authoritative regime. It would take a lot for Donald Trump to be able to come in there and do that, having like zero political support.
Right, but with all due respect, people said the same thing about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and somehow he and his sycophantic enablers managed to do that. They are pressing, my point being, they're looking to figure out how to press the Constitution any which way, to bend it any which way they can for their own political power.
Oh, I
and for
have
their
no
own
doubt. I have zero doubt that he would love to be a king. Like the gilded words he keeps using, the letter from the king that he
Yep.
adores and loves. Of course. And you know what's sick? A lot of people want power like that. I mean, you even saw Joe Biden not willing to give up power for, even though everyone saw that he couldn't even hold on to it anymore. This is the
Right.
problem with power. It corrupts absolutely. You know what I mean? And so that's why we are so lucky to be in a free country where you and I can talk about it like this. But yeah, this is the problem. And maybe his delusions of grandeur are even grander than others, clearly. But I think, yeah, at the end of the day, like what he wants and what he can do are two different things. I think there's a strategic purpose to saying that he could run for a third term, and that is to not look like a lame duck and to troll people. And maybe he's trying to push the limits and see what he can do. But if there was ever a moment to change the Constitution, it's going to be right now at the height of the height of his popularity, because every time we look, every single day, his poll numbers are dropping every day.
Yep. And look, and let me just say, it's another reason why I'm constantly saying that there should be age limits, age term limits as well. I mean, you have people that are sitting there in Congress for 40 years, whether on the House or the Senate side. To me, I always had a problem with it. The same thing with our Supreme Court. Had Ruth Bader Ginsburg walked away, we would not be having this constitutional, issues that we're having right now,
Totally.
like with the Dobbs decision. They all just don't want to leave, because before, these positions were sort of a service, a duty, like doing jury duty. Nobody lived to 100 in the olden days when these decisions were ultimately transcribed, right, by our founding fathers. People died in the 50s and 60s. So at best, you were on the bench for what, 14, 15, 16 years? Now they're into their late 90s and they still won't leave. But
thanks to pharmaceuticals.
and many other things called advancements that the NIH is going to lose in terms of funding. But I want to ask you something about this so-called...
Wait, can I ask you something really quick on the topic of age? Because you've known Trump for forever. I don't mean to take over this, but you've known Trump forever. And I saw Maggie Haberman on a podcast saying that like Trump is really declining compared to the person that you've known for so many years. I mean, when you see him and the way he speaks, like, do you think that he's kind of experiencing what Joe Biden experienced between the ages, like the late 70s, early 80s right now?
No.
You don't think so?
I see he's aged, and he has. Don't forget, when I stopped working for him, when all of my bullshit came into fruition, it was 2018. All right. We are now 7 years later. I've aged in 7 years. Look at pictures of me that they show on television. My hair was jet black. I didn't have a wrinkle on my face. I'm
you went through a lot.
You think?
Yeah.
And by the way, this is another issue that we're
You
seeing.
don't look terrible though, Michael. You make it seem like you're still a good-looking guy.
I look and I feel like hell rolled over in a handbasket. 51 days of solitary confinement and 13 months of incarceration and a 6-year sentence.
Why did they put you in solitary confinement? It's not like you're some sort of like...
right? Not only did they put me in solitary, when they reincarcerated me and then put me in solitary for another 16 when I was at 500 Pearl Street, they handcuffed and shackled me, put me into a freezer, and then shipped me back up to Otisville because I wouldn't sign a counterfeit document. That was the litmus test that Trump used in order to violate people's First Amendment rights, like these student visas that they are doing this to, whether it's at Tufts, at Columbia, at Brown. This is what they are doing, these illegal protests. I'm telling you, he's playing with the Constitution. But before we even go there, and by the way, you want to ask me those other questions? I'm happy to come on to your Substack
I do.
To your YouTube, whatever.
It's hard for me as a journalist to be the one not being able to ask the question, so I apologize.
I know,
I'm trying to hijack your show. I'm like,
you're like biting your lip.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm loving it.
You're always welcome to go on my show.
Done. Look, the so-called D-Day reciprocal tariff plan. Let me ask you this. Somewhere along the line, Trump constantly brings up these trade imbalances. But Reuters, they highlighted these concerns from the federation is called the National Retail Federation, that these tariffs will significantly raise prices for the American consumer. We all know this to be factually accurate, that it is the consumer that will bear the brunt of each and every one of these reciprocal tariffs. So my question to you, how could the country, and I don't care, Republican, Democrat, Independent, anybody that doesn't see this for what it is, how could they be so stupid?
To support Donald Trump and then have to deal with tariffs?
To not understand that these tariffs will be paid for by the American consumer and not by the reciprocal country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to deny that the price won't be passed on to the consumers. I mean, companies, big business, they don't like to add to their costs, their budgets. They maybe they will fire people maybe to make up for the costs, streamline, as they might say. That's not good for the economy. We'll take on the costs. I don't see them just being charitable about it and saying, oh, we'll take on the costs to make this happen, to bring back jobs. It just doesn't usually work out that way. Again, like Donald Trump really ran on closing off the border, which he has done, immigration, and inflation, right? Handling inflation, because Americans kept saying that their pocketbook was the most important thing to them this election cycle. They valued that even over the fact that he had all these indictments and personal issues. And, so if the fact that he's not focusing on the things that they elected him to do, and in fact, maybe making, inflation worse, I think that's really going to hurt him. Like I said, again, in the midterms, like this is what tells. And like a lot of members and senators that I've spoken to, Republican members and senators, to be clear, they say that they're nervous about the downstream effects of all this. They're hearing it when they're home with their constituents. I mean, especially those in the Midwest, exporters of soybeans, to China. What are they going to do? And if Doge is cutting at USDA, which has often been a supplement or subsidy to these farmers that can't sell because of tariffs, if that's going to be cut, then what's going to happen? You know what I mean? There's going to be a real impact on the economy. And like, we saw it from Biden. Like, the Republicans were great at branding it the Biden inflation, right? Bidenomics was a boogie word. If it happens with Trump and we get the actual word inflation associated with him, I mean, that's a killer. That's a political killer. He won't be able to stay on for a third term. He'll be booed everywhere he goes. There's one thing you don't get in the way of. It's your pocketbook. Like, people do not like that. So It's a risky game, although you would know this, and I'm turning on my little journalist hat again, because everyone I've spoken to that's known Trump for a long time says he has been obsessed with tariffs his entire life.
That's absolutely not true. Absolutely
Really?
not true. Absolutely 100% not true. What he was obsessed with was the fact that the United States has an unfair trade balance. He was like, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. And we've had this conversation. Trump and I and many other people together had this conversation. Since this is the Tara Palmeri show, no problem. Let me give you the emes onto it, the truth that what happened.
Yes, please.
He never understood why it is that China has a trade imbalance with the United States of like $500 billion, or Canada with their $100 or $200 billion. Okay, he was explained. Because here in America, we don't produce shit. All right. And Americans are the single largest consumers of product in the world, more than every other country. All right. For whatever the reason, Americans like cheap goods, right? We get to save
We all
more
like
money.
cheap stuff. Doesn't matter where you are. You want to save money.
Well, yes, but most countries don't buy, for example, like the way that America does. So that's why you have
it's
this
cheaper
trade
though
imbalance.
when you live in Europe. Like the food is cheaper and it's higher quality.
Everything is cheaper. Everything's cheaper. And
rent is cheaper. Healthcare, everything.
Everything. And the reason that I bring this up is because he knows that we don't produce anything in this country. The days like where Ford or General Motors everything was produced in America. They would get their leather from Chicago. They would get their nuts and bolts and steel from Pennsylvania. Today, all that shit is imported. All the steel, the aluminum, and stuff from Canada. Our wood, the softwood that's used for construction, from Canada. We have electricity that powers the entire sort of like northeast of this country is coming from Ottawa. It comes from Canada. Why? Well, I don't know. For whatever reason, we didn't build our own infrastructure within which to take care of a power grid. We have, but not enough. So in order for us to build it, it will cost us more than what it costs in order to import that energy from Canada. And so it was a dollar cost average, and it was a economic discussion that ultimately led to why we have the trade deal with Canada. Trump wants to burn that all down. He just doesn't want to burn down Canada and Mexico and China and the EU. He wants to basically make us an isolationist country, as if you're going to be able to go and open up a manufacturing facility by walking into Costco or Walmart or Myers or any one of these big box stores and buy like an inflatable manufacturing plant, right? So get 10,000 migrants before we ship them off to Venezuela. Get them to start blowing up some inflatable manufacturing facility. That's not how it works. And he knows that. But for whatever the reason might be, they are stuck on this tariff thing because he played it to his base so hard that this is what they're expecting.
Yeah. I mean, if you say to people who've seen their communities fall apart because of globalization, and you say, I can bring back your vibrant community, your ghost town will now be a hub of manufacturing and wealth and prosperity, and who's going to say no to that?
I've tried a lot of ways to relax. Tried meditation, therapy, the occasional rage tweet, but nothing. I mean, nothing has helped me unwind quite like Via. It is actually a game changer. So I've talked to each and every one of you, and I told you I've struggled with my sleep for years. Tossing, turning, overthinking, replaying mistakes I've made in my head at like 2 a.m. But ever since I started taking Via's Dream Gummies, I sleep like a baby. And a baby who didn't work for Trump. And it's not just sleep. Via has something for everyone, has something for everything. So whether you need to relax, to focus, to recharge, or just stop giving a damn for a few hours, they got you covered. These are hemp-derived, lab-tested, organic products crafted right here in the United States of America from independent, American-owned farms. This isn't some gas station mystery snack. It is clean, safe, and yeah, it actually works. Over 500,000 people are already on the Via train, and with their award-winning effect-forward lineup from zero to high THC, you can dial in the exact vibe that you want. Take their product finder quiz and find what fits you. And after it does, you can thank me later. So if you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and treat yourself to Via's annual Spring 420 sale. These are like Black Friday level savings with up to 35% site-wide right now and up to 50%. You hear that? Up to 50% off packs and bundles. Plus, you also get a free gift and more savings with your first offer using our exclusive code Cohen. Plus, there's more. Enjoy free shipping on all orders over $100. So that's code Cohen, Cohen, at the link in our description. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. So please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Enhance your every day with Via.
Exactly. But it's just logistically, it's going to take 10 years to bring these jobs back, if they're ever brought back. It's going to scramble the economy in the meantime. And as Elon Musk said, there's going to be short-term pain. It's interesting. I had Mark Cuban on my show, and what he said to me was he thinks Elon Musk actually sees benefit in a recession. that it might be good for him for business.
Well, sure it was, because he's sitting with billions of dollars of cash. It's good for Mark Cuban too, by the way. I know Mark very, very well. It's good for all billionaires, because while everybody else is sucking shit through a straw, they're loaded with cash. They don't need to go to the banks. They could buy up everything, right? And they're buying it on the cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
So, look, you have a lot of connections, especially within the GOP and so on. I want to ask you this. Are members of the GOP that you're speaking to, are they quietly concerned about this tariff bill and the thing that they're doing? And is Trump going to be able to, for example, split with some of the warnings that these GOP members are expressing to him, that this is going to cause, not could, but that it will cause a recession?
I mean, they're very much worried. They are very much worried about the downstream effects of Donald Trump's policies, even the DOGE cuts, how they will impact rural areas. They tend to impact small towns that voted for Republicans, that voted for Trump, and they're very nervous. I mean, they've got farmers there that export. They've got people that make things. These are not like the big city that export services. They export actual products. And so they're going to be hit the hardest. They've got the manufacturing plants in North Dakota and Indiana and Michigan. And it's just like, they're the ones who are really bracing for it. It's the red states. So like, again, you're only as strong as your political might. And he's really kind of playing around. And this is the other thing. They are so desperate to pass those tax cuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to have the political juice to do that? You've got to raise the debt ceiling, which no Republican wants to do, right? They never like to raise the debt ceiling. So they're going to need Democrats to help them pass to do that. Trump needed Democrats 4 times during his first administration to help him raise the debt ceiling. And then they want to pass.
They just gave him. But they just wait, Tara. They just gave him the ability to raise the debt ceiling. Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats, those 9 others, they capitulated again to Trump's desire.
That wasn't that. You're talking about the one that was a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
No, that was just the continuing resolution. That wasn't the debt ceiling yet. The debt ceiling comes up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but that's
the debt
going to
ceiling's
be
a
to
different
raise.
Thing.
Well, we'll see what they do, because to me, I thought that they were both connected. Yeah, funding bill.
No, they're not.
All right, no, we'll see on that one too.
I mean, that is another opportunity for like Democrats to get something from Republicans, like demand something in exchange. We'll see if they actually do anything. But point is like trying to pass this massive bill through reconciliation, when, I mean, it was pretty telling that they had to pull Elise Stefanik's nomination for UN for UN ambassador. They are not in a good place when they can't spare a House vote. I mean, that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
And I was talking to some people.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was talking to some people today who are, in the Trump world, and they're nervous about it all. Not to mention the fact that everyone is still pissed off about the Signalgate stuff, the Mike Waltz stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard that Mike Waltz in a few weeks need to spend more time with his family. The stories are not dying down. So, and I bet you there's more fallout from this, the drip, 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 because they just handled it so poorly.
Yeah, but there's more than just Mike Waltz and Signalgate that's pissing Trump off. I hear it from people, too, who are still associated to the inner circle. He's pissed off with Mike Waltz. He's angry, not pissed off, but he's angry at Pete Hegseth for doing something so stupid, which is to put those operational war plans onto Signal, onto that app. But he's pissed off at Lutnick for the Social Security comments, that he made. Mm-hmm. He's pissed off with a whole group of individuals right now. And the problem is under the old Trump that I knew, he'd fucking have me fire every single one of them. The problem, though, is he's not sure
he's the guy
who he would get.
Well, there you go. There's a talent issue out there. You're so right. I mean, the guy who made his, name on saying you're fired isn't going to fire one of the biggest fuck ups you probably could happen in an administration, a major security breach.
Yep.
with some guy who's just flexing because he went from like infantry to, basically top command and could just, choose a war, to choose attack plans like it's World of Warcraft, and he's just like flexing to his friends with emojis and all. And it was so over the top. He didn't need to do that. None of the people on that chain needed to be informed about what was happening except Mike Waltz.
Right. I mean, it was embarrassing to Trump. That's the whole thing. And any time that you take oxygen or camera time, it's the same thing, away from Trump, he gets pissed off. Right? Like, for example, like having Lutnick over Trump's right shoulder on the Air Force One, laughing about the tariffs and so on. That pisses Trump off. You can't imagine how many times he's probably going to watch that, replay it, look at Howard trying to like heighten himself up because, Howard's not 6 feet, so that he can have his face seen over Trump's shoulder, right? That sort of stuff really irritates Trump. Because it's not about anybody else. It's only about him. It's interesting, right?
But for some reason, he's let it be all about Elon Musk for a while. I mean, I got to say, this is the first week in a while when the story wasn't all about Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's true. But, not just the tariffs don't only hurt, for example, farmers and manufacturing and so on. It's not just the tariffs. It's Trump's deportation policy, which has now obviously expanded to sending illegal protesters, right? To lock up. It's not just the Tren de Aragua or MS-13 to Venezuela and so on. What it also does is it hurts the economy because many of these migrants handle jobs that involve these sectors as well, like construction. Everybody who knows that when there's like a booming economy, whether let's say Florida, and they're building houses, there are these sections that they go to, they find a bunch of the migrants who know how to hit a nail and a hammer, and they've been in construction in their own countries and so on, and they put them to work. That's why we're able to buy a house at X amount of dollars. But if hypothetically you're paying now an additional 125% on soft lumber, you're paying an additional 100+%, if not more, on labor.
Oh, it's going to be so expensive.
The house is unaffordable. And the problem is not people of my age, right? It's the young generation that will have no opportunity. They're already getting fucked left and right. What the New York Times reported on this. What are you hearing from insiders?
I mean, it's so obvious, Michael. I mean, there's a lot of risk. And like, if they pass these tax cuts, by the way, and they benefit the wealthy, that's going to be really hard. Like there's talk already I saw on Axios about the fact that they may have to raise the tax cut for the top 1%. And, that's something they're going to deal with because like they're going to get a lot of blowback if this is just some corporate like tax break and all of Trump's buddies, make out because of this. So, we're in a really weird time. I think exactly what you said is how people feel. I don't think that they're not immune to the politics on the ground. The only person who seems to be immune to it, well, the two people seem to be Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because President Trump said to, Kristen Welker yesterday, I don't care if the price of cars go up. Well, you don't know what it's like to have to buy a car and not be able to afford it.
Right. In fact, he'll never pay for gasoline ever again, considering as a former, right? He's going to have Secret Service driving him around for the rest of his life.
It's easy for people who've never had to, pay for things, or maybe at some point, maybe he understood the cost of things. I don't know. He did grow up pretty wealthy. I mean, but it's easy for people who don't understand the cost of things right now to say, oh, there'll be a little bit of pain. But like the reason you were elected was because people thought that you could ease their pain. Whether they were right or wrong about that, your mandate is essentially to ease their pain. And if you don't do that, these town halls, come on, these members have been advised, Republican members have been advised, don't do a town hall. There's one member, I'm blanking on her first name, but it's Victoria Sparks. She decided to do a town hall and it was like off the chains. Granted, it was a lot of liberal activists there, but at least she stood there. I mean, they're still her constituents. Just because they don't vote for her doesn't mean they're not her constituents. But it's not a good time when you're like a few months in and people are afraid to face the voters.
Right. Why do you call them liberal activists? They're just constituents that are in that area that want to voice their frustration. I guarantee you, if we really
if they're organizing to get people there and like doing petitions, like they're activists. That's not just like your casual voter.
Well, what if
you donate to a campaign?
What if there are casual voters that are in there? And what if hypothetically they're sick and tired?
The political article that I read, she spoke to the people that were there. And like she described a lot of them as like very active in politics.
And of course she did, but that's the Trump narrative. And that anybody that opposes them are all they're all radical left activists. That's what she was claiming.
No. This reporter talked to the people who were there. She went to the event and she talked to the people that were there and asked them about who they are, who they voted for, their activities. She didn't find a single Republican there. That was interesting to me. And
I don't buy any of that bullshit. You're going to tell me there wasn't a single?
I take exception to that.
There's not a single Republican. You're going to tell me there wasn't a single Republican that was there at that town hall?
That is what this reporter reported at Politico. And like, I worked there and I do not think that she would do that. Maybe someone slipped through that she didn't talk to, but like usually when you sign in, you put your name down and your party affiliation when you get into these events. But like from the people she spoke to, it was overwhelmingly Democrats, which is fine. They are still your constituents. They are still your constituents. And even if you look at the polling, like CBS had a poll, like 7 out of 10 Republicans are happy with Trump's dealing with various things. Like Republicans seem to be sticking with him. They're giving him the benefit of the doubt. For how long? And I don't think you can ignore those numbers.
No, you can't. And not until it starts to hit them in the pocket, whether it's because grandma or grandpa or mom and dad can't afford their insulin, or worse than that, they can't afford food and insulin. And if they pay for food and insulin, they can't pay for rent and so on. When it starts to hit you close to home, that's when you say enough is enough, including like, you see these Venezuelans in South Florida who are furious right now with the deportations. They're themselves are being deported. One guy turned around and said, wait, he's deporting me. I voted for him. Well, you know what? Like FAFO, right? Fuck around and find out. We warned you.
How could you vote for him if you're not an American?
Well, I think that they had some, I don't know, residency card or something like that.
You can't vote with a residency. You have to become an American to vote.
Well, maybe it was then the wife who was an American citizen that voted for him, but somebody in the family voted for him, and now all of a sudden,
wait. Are you suggesting there's voter fraud like Republicans do?
No, I am not. No, I'm not, Smarty. All right. No, maybe you're talking about that as a family. We voted for him, maybe the wife or whatever. But
my point him is or something.
Now they are furious. And by the way, the same thing goes for Muslim Americans, right? Who are furious because Trump said that he was going to put an end to the Israel-Hamas conflict in 24 hours. In fact, he was going to do it before he even took office, after he became president-elect. That's not going over too well.
Right.
Or how about the steel manufacturing, the United Auto Workers? They're furious at him in Michigan and in other states. Why? Well, now with these tariffs, cars are more expensive. They're cutting back. They're ending up firing a whole slew of people in order to cut costs at the manufacturing facilities. Right? It is a trickle down economic disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone has predicted in a recession. The recession has not happened yet. The R word has not happened. Trump says this is the art of the deal and bringing people to the table and getting what he wants. We'll see what happens. And, he was sort of saved with the price of eggs going down, which is weirdly, the avian bird flu cleared up on its own. But again, it's for March 31st. We're not even into the first 100 days yet. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and it's not going to go too well. But let me ask you, because we were talking about, for example, Mike Walls and Pete Hegseth and so on. Knowing Trump as well as I do, it's not like Trump to shy away, right, from scapegoating when things go south. And I think we'll both acknowledge that Signalgate was a complete and total fuck up. right?
Yeah, and I think conservatives would too.
Yeah, I think so. Why do you think that he's choosing to stand by them? I mean, because NBC suggested that he may fear opening up a can of worms by admitting fault, because he never admits fault, but by doing that could open up like a Pandora's box.
Yeah, they sort of have this feeling of like they have to close ranks, and if they can't. Firing too often reflects like it reflects poorly on his decision making. But again, like first term, he's already outlived Mike Flynn, who was fired on February 14th. Who can forget that Valentine's Day? It was ruined. But yeah, it's definitely a different tact than Trump. Trump also went through multiple campaign managers in the past. This time he stuck with the same two. So.
Yep.
Maybe he's changed a little bit and seen that like firing too often makes him seem like a flawed manager or a flawed, leader. But also with Hegseth, they spent a lot of money to have him confirmed. They were bullying Senator Joni Ernst just for having questions about Hegseth. He was obviously very underqualified as a former Fox News host. And I think it's fair to say that like, they spent so much political capital on getting Hegseth confirmed that Trump probably feels like he's got to stick with him. Whereas Waltz, who I've been hearing from people inside the White House, like there's not a lot of love for him in there right now. They're angry at him because obviously the hilarious part is the Cardinalson is talking to a reporter as if Trump doesn't love talking to reporters and everyone else there doesn't. But
right.
it's a lot easier to replace a national security advisor. They're not Senate confirmed like a defense secretary. Like to replace Pete Hegseth, you'd have to go through another confirmation hearing. They spent millions of dollars to confirm him. Tomorrow, Trump could just appoint another NSA tomorrow. He did it. How many did he have? 3 of them, I think, after one was Flynn, Bolton, and then blanking on the last one. But, when there's so many, it's hard to remember them. But I spoke to Bolton last week, and he was proud to say he was the longest lasting. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and I think he wants to keep the narrative going in his direction. And I think a firing is just another day of news.
But one of the other reasons why, and I completely agree with you, that Republicans are very nervous right now as we're going into the special election and in 2026, the midterm election. So because, again, if you're older, you're worried about your Social Security. If you're veterans, you're feeling the heat already from the mass firings and so on. But this national security leak, this signal gate, every national security expert out there is calling the leak one of the most damaging in America's history. How much internal pressure you think is mounting for real accountability? Because I do really believe that within the next maybe month, Mike Waltz gets shit canned. Somebody, knowing Trump as well as I do, somebody has to take the fall, because he also believes that by somebody taking the fall, that it puts an end to the conversation.
Yeah, I think there is some new reporting from the Wall Street Journal this morning that there were multiple chat groups that were formed by Mike Waltz on Signal, including one about how to end the war in Ukraine. The fact that stuff is still leaking out, the fact that JD Vance and Susie Wiles want Waltz out, I think these are all damaging stories for him, and they lay the groundwork for an eventual firing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But, that's another topic that I want to just throw in here. We now know of Signalgate, not because this administration told us, not because they did what they're supposed to do, which is to preserve all of these documents, but rather because of the inadvertent fuck up and sending it to Jeffrey Goldberg over at The Atlantic. This episode of Mea Culpa is brought to you by Graza, my new favorite olive oil. It's fresh, it's never blended, and it comes from a single type of olive, the Picual, straight out of Jaén, Spain, where over half of the world's olive oil is produced. So why Graza? Single origin goodness, that's why. Only one olive from one region. No mysterious blends. That means a traceable, a fresher product without mixing in any low grade or unknown oils. It's super fun. It has squeeze and spray bottles too. So there's no more messy tins or drippy spouts. Just aim, squeeze, and go. I mean, there are 3 types for any task that you have. One, they have something called frizzle. That's their newest, with a higher 490-degree Fahrenheit smoke point, which is perfect for frying, crisping, or grilling. Sizzle at 410 degrees Fahrenheit, which is an everyday cooking oil for roasting, marinating, and sauteing. Then they have something called drizzle, which is a bold, a punchy finishing oil that you sprinkle on your salads, you dip your bread in, or even you top it off on your ice cream. Look, let me be clear. My daughter is the actual chef in the house, and she uses olive oil on everything from pastas to preparing steak. I mean, not only does this cook well, it smells delicious. Plus, as a healthy eater, Graza's extra virgin oils, they are loaded with those heart and brain friendly polyphenols. So it's good for you. Look, so here's what you get. You get 10% off your first order on Graza's site. But I personally suggest grabbing the trio. That's all the 3 squeezy bottles, the sizzle, the frizzle, and the drizzle, so that you're set for every style of cooking. So head right now to graza.co and use code Cohen to get 10% off of Trio, which includes, again, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle, and get to cooking your next chef quality meal. Again, head to Graza, graza.co, and use code Cohen, Cohen, to get 10% off the Trio. And I love saying it, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle. So get cooking now. We have to imagine that Signalgate 1, right, which is this specific leak on the operational plans in Yemen against the Houthis, was not the only Signalgate that we're going to learn. That's the part that I think causes the most amount of damage to this administration right now. The fact that you and I could have a conversation, we don't know what else is being discussed, but every time something new pops out, it opens up the old wound. Oh, it's not Signalgate 1 anymore, it's Signalgate 2. What if they're using Signal, which to me is so stupid of them? What if now we find out we're up to Signalgate 8? What if we find out that ultimately Steve Witkoff, who was attached to that specific chat, who was in the Kremlin at the time that it came in with his personal phone, what if now all of these Signal chats are in the hands of Russia and it compromises America's national security? What do we do then?
I mean, then we're in a serious situation, but the problem is that no one's investigating it. Like, the inspector generals have all been fired. The Department of Justice isn't interested. Like, this would be the kind of thing that you would think a special counsel would look into, but that's a witch hunt word, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But yeah, these are the kind of things. This is why you do an investigation, to find out if there's a security breach, because that security breach doesn't just impact them and their, reputations. It impacts our national security. And there are a lot of repercussions. I mean, who would want to share top secret information, classified information that your assets are procuring, and I mean allies, like in the UK, like MI6, or in France, there's secret services. Why would they want to share intelligence with the Americans when the Americans are just texting it all over the place? They've already sort of messed up their Houthi response, right? Because now the Houthis have inside information about how they're being targeted. They know more about the sources and the details. The sources might be at risk, the assets on the ground, by the way. And this is dangerous stuff. Like, there are people's lives on the line, not just our fighter pilots, which are pissed off that that this sort of information was just texted around willy-nilly without, containment, not treated as if it's top secret classified. Like, you want to know that at the top of the chain of the command, that they're protecting you. You're the one who's putting your life on the line, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of repercussions. This is not really over yet. Just because they don't want to do an investigation, there will be ripple effects. And they will be felt in subtle ways that maybe we won't really know, but our security long term will probably be affected because of it.
But
Long
this
term
isn't
and
the
maybe
first time,
short term.
Tara. Yeah, maybe. But this isn't the first time that we've seen this happen. In fact, many people talked about this during the campaign. Do we not remember when Trump was in Helsinki and he gave to Vladimir Putin certain documents? Those documents, ultimately, it was revealed because, as like you said, an investigation was done. Those documents were informational documents that were given to Trump by Israel in regard to Iran. I mean,
Yeah.
so, our national security is being compromised by the people who are supposed to be protecting it the most. I mean, you have people like Reality Winner that went to jail for 5 years because of one document. Here we're talking about operational war plans
Yeah.
in
No, I
real
think you're
time.
totally right. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, listen, I don't in any way think that you're not wrong about that. This is not a joke. I lived in Belgium during a lot of the terror attacks, and like personally saw people I knew impacted by them. I was at the airport when one of the bombs went off in 2015. Another bomb went off below my office. And the Belgian security system was just not up to the task. They needed coordination with the FBI and the French system and the French security systems. And like, this is how the world stays safe. Like, we share our secrets with our allies. The U.S. stepped in and they really helped the French and the Belgians contain their ISIS situation because they were just being pummeled every single week. It was horrible, the amount of terror attacks. I was under lockdown like half the time I lived there in Brussels. Not half the time, but a big chunk of the time. But like, we rely on exchanges of top secret intelligence to be able to do those kind of things. And when the Americans stepped in, it became a much safer place to live. But like, is that going to be is that going to be the way anymore in the world? Are these countries also going to tell us when they're getting intel about an attack to our country? So we really have to keep those lines. Our secrets are our most treasured thing. Like, they are like the most treasured intel that we have, right? I mean, they are the power that we have in this world. That's what makes us a superpower, is our ability to protect ourselves and others.
Right.
And if you lose that ability, like, you're nothing. You can be trampled on.
Trump has a complete wrong understanding on strength. He believes that strength is through fight as opposed to strength via diplomacy. I mean, strength via diplomacy will beat out a fist fight on any given day because you have all the information that you need in order to ensure that you don't even have to get into the fight. He doesn't want that anymore. He wants to go about the world now. Literally, we should go on our own, that we should become some isolationist nation, right? And allow, for example, Prime Minister Starmer to take the lead with our allies, or I don't even know what we would call them anymore. We'll just call them, fellow, right? Fellow countries.
NATO members.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, he
well,
doesn't
I mean,
want to have anything to do with them.
I don't entirely disagree with him on the fact that like that the Europeans have been like behind on this. Like, they really have been. Their security has been based on ours for so long, and they needed to step up in a big way. And I don't think his demands about NATO countries paying more are necessarily the worst thing. Like, even if you talk to NATO members, they will acknowledge it. Now, they'll also say, Article 5, when one country is attacked, the rest step in. When was the last time that actually happened? Or the only time it really happened was when the U.S. was attacked, and they all came in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've traveled to a lot of the military bases around Europe, and they're filled with NATO troops from all over, including Ukraine, and they are there protecting, our bases and keeping us secure, and they helped us with the war where a lot of their own men died. So I don't think you can forget that, but I do think that there was a disproportionate, way in which the U.S. really was securing the rest of the world, and the Europeans need to step up. I don't think it's the worst thing that he did. In fact, I actually think it was a good thing.
Yeah, but there's a difference between stepping up and stepping out. That's what he's basically doing. He's stepping us right out of NATO. He wants to step away from NATO as he tried to do the first go around. But I want to ask you this because Trump attacks Zelensky on a regular basis. There's nothing new there. But all of a sudden now, he's beginning to add Putin's name to the conversation. You believe that Trump is pivoting here to appear tougher on, I don't want to call Putin a foreign adversary because he calls him his friend, but what do you think is driving this sudden shift in bringing up Putin's name?
I think he feels embarrassed about what happened last time, where he had this call and he said it was going so well, and then nothing happened in terms of the ceasefire. So, he's calling him out. He's like, I'm here. Don't fuck with me. You're making me look like a clown. And he always adds the caveat, but I think we'll be fine at the end. But you know him better than anyone, Michael. Like, how would he treat an adversary? Would he do something like that? Feels like it.
Yeah, so I think that he's using the airwaves, knowing that Putin and his people are constantly monitoring every single television show, or especially anytime Trump has an appearance, whether it's a podcast, whether it's on a Joe Rogan, whether it's on Fox, they're monitoring it, transcribing it, analyzing it as they do. I think he's just sending Putin a message. And Putin understands Trump well enough to know, hey, you got to do something here for me because this is hurting me and I can't let that happen. So I'm going to need you to step up. And it was sort of like an advance message, a cryptic message before their phone call. But, finally, Tara, because the hour comes to an end, like I said early, it comes very, very quickly. As someone who's covered Trump extensively, I remember speaking with you going back into 2015, onto someone who's covered Trump extensively. What do you think the biggest underreported story is right now that Americans need to pay more attention to?
I worry about the FDA, the gutting there, because that's our food and health safety. And if you start firing people from the place that makes sure that baby formula is not poisonous, like, that's scary. I worry about HHS, measles outbreaks, that kind of stuff, pushing an anti-vaccine agenda. I think it's fair to ask questions about vaccinations, but to not, to tell people not to or advise them not to vax is not great. And then I worry about the fact that we have a shortage of air traffic controllers, and the idea that they're gutting the FAA, the Federal Administration on Aviation. These are the kind of things that everyday people can understand. I know we talk a lot about constitutional crisis and democracy at stake, but just on a day-to-day level, these are the things that impact you on an everyday level. Government is supposed to work. That is the job. When it doesn't work, our lives fall apart. We take it for granted every single day. And when it does not work and it doesn't go well, lives are at stake. And so that's what I worry about. And I think actually those stories are the easier ones to understand.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
It's just good governance is good governance. The reason Trump lost last time was because there was bad governance during COVID, during a huge crisis. And so people chose Biden, who wasn't even popular with his own base of the party, because Trump was seen as unable to control a health crisis. And, he's at risk of doing the same thing again if he's not seen as being a good governor, you could say, actually running the government the right way. And when you're letting, when your top donors take a sledgehammer to the government, you run the risk of causing real disruption. And disruption can be a good thing when managed well, or it can be a dangerous thing. And so those are the stories I think are the most important right now. And until then, obviously we have to keep our eye on as journalists, as free people on our democracy and our rights. But, that doesn't really translate to people who are looking in their, who are concerned about their day-to-day lives. It's just they're not thinking about that. It's not something they think about all day long. It doesn't penetrate. It's hard to explain, frankly. And I think just keeping it simple and real.
Yep. Well, Tara, you make us all smarter. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. And I will be seeing you, hopefully, and speaking to you very, very soon.
Yeah, please subscribe to my newsletter, by the way. It's the Red Letter. It's on Substack. I hope you'll all do that. And I'm also on YouTube at Tara Palmeri, and it's not spelled like the Jennifer Palmieri. It's TaraPalmeri.
There you go.
Thanks,
well, I spelled it wrong too. Tara, great seeing you.